Hello and welcome to Middleware Friday for March 10th. My name is Kent Weir and I'm here to talk to you about Azure Logic Apps and SAP Part 2 as part of episode. So the feature content for this particular episode is Azure Logic Apps and SAP using the Enterprise Integration Pack as part of the Logic Apps service. In addition, the Community Corner, we're going to focus on how to remaster enterprise architecture for cloud native world by Richard Sirota. This was an interesting blog post that he wrote for Pivotal, and I thought it was worth highlighting and bringing forward for the community. Also, our good friend Sandro, who never stops working, has released a beta version of the biztalk scheduled task adapter for biztalk Server 2016. So I know there's been quite a few people out there waiting for some of the community tools like the scheduled task adapter and biztalk deployment framework to be updated so that they're supported and working inside of biztalk Server 2016. So thanks, Sandro, for doing your part and helping out with the scheduled task adapter. I know there's many people that are anxiously awaiting for it. Also, biztalk 360 has announced Integrate 2017 in London. So that's by Saravana Kumar, and we'll go ahead and chat a little bit about that event as well. As part of the feature content, I've compiled a few notes that I feel are worth going over. So this episode does build off of part 1 or episode 9. So if you haven't watched that episode, strongly recommend that you go through that episode because we'll talk about things like the on-premise data gateway and how you go ahead and call an SAP service, whether that's an IDOC, RFC, TRFC, or BAPI. The Enterprise Integration Pack is something that we're going to introduce as part of this episode. I haven't talked about it before. To be honest, I haven't used it before this particular episode, but it gave me the opportunity to dig in and actually get some experience with it. So this was something that GA just before Christmas. This is something that John Fancy of the product group has really been driving. And it's really focused on business-to-business connectivity and also trading partner activities. So for the purpose of this particular episode, we're going to focus on XML schemas and transformations, and we're going to go ahead and upload those artifacts into our integration account, and then we're going to go ahead and use them. Do know that there are separate charges for using the integration account. It is consumption-based, not on a per transaction basis, but really around how many artifacts you're using. The good news is there is a free tier. Do note it's maximum 1 integration account per region per subscription. As part of the free tier, you also have 10 EDI agreements, which we won't use today. We have entitlement for 25 maps, and there's an unlimited amount of schema certificates and partners that I can include within the free tier. Do note, and I didn't discuss this last time, is that when you use the SAP or other enterprise connectors, there are some charges that may apply. So you want to be aware of that before you start and light up an on-premise data gateway and SAP. They are in preview right now, so you do have some entitlement at this point in time, but be aware of as we move forward. There is also dev test pricing for the integration account and connection charges. So be aware of those as well so that you can optimize your spend. Obviously, this isn't a talk focused around pricing, so I will leave you with a link where you can go find additional information. So this may look familiar if you tuned into episode 9. What really is different this time around is that we've introduced schemas and maps, and we can go ahead and call a map that will take a canonical message and transform it into an SAP request. So I chatted about this in my book previously, where if you take SAP schemas, they're really ugly. You wouldn't want to expose those and pass that complexity down to your calling clients. Obviously, a pattern that's well understood in the biztalk world is using some sort of canonical schema where you can expose a more user-friendly message type out to your calling consumer, and then you can go ahead and map into the specific SAP request. Once we've gone ahead and called out to SAP, we'll take that response and we'll run it through another map. And this time we'll take the specific SAP response and turn it into our canonical response. And so we'll use a map to go ahead and do that. Once again, when we are calling SAP, we need to go through the on-premise data gateway, and the way that we're able to bridge firewalls is through the Azure Service Bus Relay. Now, in order to go ahead and build or use the Enterprise Integration Pack, there's a few prerequisites. So obviously you need an Azure subscription. You'll need to be able to create an integration account. You will want Visual Studio 2015 and the Enterprise Integration Tools for Visual Studio 2015 in order to construct your maps and schemas. Now you can bring existing schemas, say from BizTalk, into the mix and go ahead and use them. This is different than Azure BizTalk Services, or what was called MABs, where we had different mapping formats. This time we can go ahead and take those .btm maps and actually go ahead and use them. Once you've gone ahead and downloaded the Enterprise Integration Pack tools, you will see a new project type within Visual Studio called Integration Account, which can be found underneath the Logic Apps templates. And as I just mentioned before, we can go ahead and bring forward our existing maps and schemas. So these are schemas that I took from an existing BizTalk project. I did create these maps myself, in part due to the maps that we do use in BizTalk have some scripting functoids, and I didn't want to have to deal with that at this point in time. So I just went ahead and recreated those and was able to easily go and map my different schemas. So that's the on-premise build portion of the solution. The next thing is we have to go ahead in Azure and create an integration account. And we can find this within the Enterprise Integration section of the Azure portal, right below the on-premise data gateway, Logic App, Service Bus, API Management. All of these are very familiar services for Microsoft integration folks. Now, once we go ahead and click on create an integration account, we need to go ahead and provision that. In this case, I'm going to choose a free pricing tier inside of West US, and I'll go ahead and create the appropriate resource group and select my subscription. Once I've gone ahead and provisioned it, I will now see a new card available for me for the integration account, and here's the configuration for it. And as part of this container, if you will, we can see our maps, schemas, certificates, partners, and agreements all in one centralized location. Now, if I want to go ahead and upload schemas, I'll go ahead and click the schemas tile. I can then click add, and then I'll be asked to browse for my specific schemas. Now, all of the schemas that I've uploaded are less than 2 megs, and so those went up no problem. Now, here's a bit of a warning or a gotcha. Inside of SAP, there's some common schema types that are used. So this is pretty normal practice if you've ever done SAP integration. Now, what happened to me was that inside of our BizTalk solution, we had a subfolder called Common SAP Types, something to that effect. And I had the common types nested inside of that folder. So naturally, I go ahead and bring this forward. It's trying to find a reference schema. And in this case, I didn't upload the reference schema first. I uploaded the proper schema. So I had to go back, upload the reference schema first, then I could go ahead and upload the parent schema, and everything then went in smooth. After I uploaded my 4 different schemas, this is what it looks like. They went in without a hitch. And next I was able to focus on maps. So I click on maps. I'm asked to browse for a file. Now here's where I also ran into a little bit of trouble. And notice that the drop down says XSLT style sheet. If you pull that drop down, it'll say all files. So naturally I selected that, did a drop down, and figured, okay, I'm gonna now go ahead and select my .btm file. Well, when I went ahead and did that, it failed. What's actually happening is you do need to upload the XSLT file for that map. Now there's 2 ways that I'm aware of that you can actually go ahead and get these files. And shout out to John Fancy for the tip. One is you can go into your Visual Studio solution and go ahead and build your solution. One of the outputs of the solution will be any XSLT for your maps. I'm using the debug profile here, and therefore I will find my XSLT representations of my maps in the debug folder on the file system. Another way, and probably not as eloquent or streamlined, is if you go ahead and actually debug a map, what will happen is a window will pop up which will provide the XSLT file. So once again, you can go ahead and save that and upload it to the portal. So choose your own adventure, both will work, and you'll be flying. Here's another gotcha that you need to know about, is if you have a logic app and you want to go ahead and use artifacts from your integration account, you essentially need to provide permission for your integration account to be used within a logic app. Now, this is my particular logic app that I've created, LA-MOC-GetEquipment-POC-KW, and I need to go into settings, integration account, and then provide the name of the integration account that I want to allow access to, and in this case, that's the name of it. Once I'm in Logic App, I can go ahead and do a search and find a transform XML action, and I'll then go ahead and select transform XML. Now I need to provide some content that I want to map. So this is an example of my first map where I'm taking the body of my web equipment request and I want to transform it to my SAP equipment request. So this will be a drop down. It's going to actually inspect my integration account because this logic app now has access to it, and then I can go ahead and select whichever map I want to use. Here's what the entire solution looks like. I've got my inbound request. I don't have any schema applied to it. This is XML. I'm going to do my initial transform. So that's my web equipment request to my SAP equipment request. I'm going to go ahead and call my equipment RFC in SAP. I'm going to provide my transformed message, and I really should have renamed these prior to saving because now I can't. It would have made more sense. But I'm going to use the output for my transform XML shape to feed the input for my send to SAP. And then on the flip side, I want to take the SAP response, my equipment response, and go ahead and map it into my web equipment response. And then I want to send it back as part of my response to my caller. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use the output from my transform XML2 shape. So enough of the PowerPoint, let's actually get into a real demo. So now I'm in Postman, and I'm going to go ahead and call my logic app through that HTTP request. Now in episode 9, I went and sent a native SAP request message in to my RFC call. This time I'm going to actually take a more generic web request where we'll then transform it using a map inside of our enterprise integration account, and then go ahead and call our SAP RFC, then get the response from SAP, transform it back into a web get equipment response that is a little bit easier to digest if you're the developer building this particular interface. So I'm going to go ahead and call this, and you can see that I now have a response, and this is a response that looks very different than the SAP response that I would have got otherwise.
I said, beat me up, I'm on fire, I'm on my grind, cause that's all we know, beat me up, I'm getting higher, I'm on mine, got me singing, all we know, beat me up, I'm on fire, I'm on my grind, got me singing, oh yeah, got you looking at my soul, yeah, I'm the bomb, ready to blow, I said, beat me up, I'm on.
Now on to our community content. Piece of content I want to look at is from Richard Seroter, and as I mentioned before, this is on the Pivotal blog. He now works for Pivotal, and it's really interesting. So Richard himself is a former enterprise architect at a large enterprise, and what he talks about is what are some of the, I guess, challenges around enterprise architecture, and certainly some of the perceptions around, being ivory tower architects. And so the question that he poses is really around with the transition towards cloud native organizations that are going under significant transformation, how does the role of an enterprise architect fit into these enterprises that are undergoing change? And do they? So what he does do, though, is he provides some pretty prescriptive advice. He was an enterprise architect. Some of the things people should consider doing as they evolve into this new world of delivering IT services. So I'm not going to go through each one, but I thought it was a very interesting article, and I know he's got a follow-up initiative on InfoQ that you should watch out for that will dive into this a little bit deeper. But I thought it was a great article. I don't want to steal his thunder. I want you to go read it because I think it is very insightful. Next up, let's talk about Sandro. Sandro has a new blog. It's being sponsored by biztalk-360, one of the partners of this show. But he talks about the BizTalk scheduled adapter. For those that may not be familiar with it, within BizTalk, you're always going to run into the situation where you need to run essentially a scheduled job, largely related to a batch or some sort of a timer. And there's not a great way out of the box that you can do this. So people have turned towards the scheduled task adapter where they've got more control over the schedule of an orchestration being lit up. Sometimes we've gone ahead and used a SQL polling adapter and a scenario for simple scheduling to kind of avoid being tied to or dependent upon this BizTalk scheduled task adapter. Now, as part of Logic Apps, we do see that there's the recurrence connector, which does provide more options than we have in BizTalk today. But until we see something out of the box from BizTalk team itself, Sandro has a good stopgap. As you can see, he has fixed a few bugs, one related to DST, one related to double pumping and sending a message twice. So feel free to check this out. You can download the adapter here, and he's got a changelog and a release history. So don't forget to send Sandro some love for all of his time and effort maintaining and being the custodian of this particular adapter. Lastly, let's talk about biztalk-360 and the upcoming Integrate 2017 conference. So I've had the opportunity to speak at this event, I guess for the last 3 years for sure. It was rebranded Integrate. It was previously known as the BizTalk Summit. biztalk-360 always does a stellar job. They're always bringing in top talent to speak, whether they be MVPs or the product group. So once again, biztalk-360 is taking this on. There are some early bird pricing that you may want to take advantage of. Save a few bucks. If you forget or weren't able to attend the previous talk, he's highlighted a few of the more popular talks from last year. And as you can see, there's 3 days, or I guess 2.5 days of content. Here's the sponsor, so shout out to them. I have been invited back to speak, so I'm super pumped to be heading back to London in the UK to go ahead and speak. This is probably my favorite event out there. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to talk about. Likely will be some sort of a cognitive / bot feel to it, but we'll see. We haven't gone through the final submissions yet. But I've been purposely holding back some content from Middleware Friday to ensure I've got something fresh for the Integrate event. Also, don't forget March 25th, the Global Integration Bootcamp throughout the world. I know there's been a new location added in the United States, actually 2. Last week I talked about how Seattle has been added to the agenda. Well, so has Chicago. So now there's 3 locations in the United States: New York, Chicago, Seattle. I will be speaking at the New York event. I'll also be joined by fellow MVPs Howard and Stephen Thomas. In addition, Mandy will also be there. Feedback, feel free to send it to either of these channels. Want to thank biztalk-360 once again for being a great partner of the show and a great ambassador of the community. So thanks again for watching. I'll leave you with the credits, and we'll see you next week on Middleware Friday.
Biz Talk.